I think you should have this back. After all, it belonged to your mother.
It is not in the Vulcan custom to receive again that which was given as a gift.
You guys break up? What'd you do?
A typically reductive inquiry, Doctor.
You know, Spock, if an Earth girl says it's me, not you, it's definitely you.
And that's a clip from Star Trek Beyond. I'm delighted to say Chris Pine, Zachary Quinto join us on the program. Gentlemen, good afternoon.
Good
Hey,
afternoon.
how are you?
Hey,
How do we find you? Zachary goes first.
I just ate an entire bag of Mentos in the car, and you find me energetically aroused by Mentos.
Fantastically well.
Yeah,
Thanks
good.
for having me.
Well, it's a pleasure to have you on the show. Tell us what you can about the movie, Zachary and Chris. Tell us just the opening parameters of where we are with this film.
Well, we're 3 years into our 5-year mission. I think there's a sense of monotony that's descended upon the Enterprise at the top of the movie. It doesn't last long, but it's a kind of unique glimpse into the day-to-day interactions of the crew and the sort of more mundane elements of being on a large floating spaceship for 5 years, right?
Yeah, it's like Eddie Izzard has the Death Star canteen bit, and we have our what's it like on day 118 of being out in space, and I think it's
That would only be 6 months, really, into a 5-year mission. We're 3
I
years.
was awful at math, Zachary.
900 days.
Don't
Chris.
start with me because I swear to God I'll get in a fist fight. With you.
He's the captain. But I thought there was a great place for the movie to start. The fact that you're all a little bit bored,
Yeah,
right.
and yes, this is what's it's not all going to be intergalactic
Exactly
warfare.
right.
Sometimes it's just going to be routine. I don't think I'd seen that done before.
No, and I think that's especially with these big films. It's always the high point of drama in anyone's life, and I like the idea of starting in a place where there is no drama. It's just exactly as you say. Especially for Kirk, at least he's finding himself in a moment where he's not driven by the same things that gave him really pinpoint focus before the death of his father and living up to the legacy, and he's looking for something to give him fire and meaning, and he just doesn't have it quite yet.
Can I ask you both about the personal struggles which you both have as characters at the start of the movie? Can you just explain a little bit more about where we find you at the start?
Yeah, it's coming up on Jim Kirk's birthday, and it's the birthday also happens to be the anniversary of the death of his father, so he is really feeling low about remembering the fact that his father's no longer with him, but also kind of bemoaning the fact that he's not driven by the same things anymore. He's not the long shadow that his father cast over the early part of his life. Just doesn't seem to be as worthwhile in keeping in his own life anymore. He needs something else to focus him, and he just doesn't have it.
And Spock is wrestling in his own way. I think he's at a real crossroads of his own journey, figuring out his allegiance to Starfleet versus his commitment to his own race and rebuilding his own race after the destruction of his planet in the first film that we made. And there's a turn of events sort of early in the film, which I think galvanizes his commitment to the Vulcan future. And so he spends a lot of the movie then he gets seriously wounded, very badly injured. So he goes through a kind of journey of mortality in a lot of ways in this film for other reasons as well. And I think it is through this journey that he arrives at a place of really knowing where his energies might best serve others moving forward.
And obviously the relationship between the two of you is key to any Star Trek story, but is it fair to say this is more of a crew movie that
Yeah.
other members of the crew have come to the fore here?
I think that's true. And, the crew gets fractured very early on. So out of this mundane, maybe the watch is not the best
Sorry.
radio.
Sorry.
I think that
This is Chris playing with his watch, but Zachary, he's still the captain.
Well, all right, but what does that make him infallible? The captain needs somebody to keep him in check, right? That's the whole point. But I feel like, early on in this film, the crew gets fractured and we get separated, into groupings that we aren't normally maybe expected to be in. For example, Spock and Bones spend a lot of this film together. Uhura and Sulu spend a lot of their time together. Kirk spends a lot of his time with Chekhov and Scotty. And for audiences and for fans, I think it's going to be a nice, unexpected turn for them to see these unconventional pairings of the crew as they're finding their way back to one another.
You have a new director, Justin Lin, new writer, Simon Pegg, who's obviously acting alongside you, and Doug Young. What difference did that make, Chris, to the feel on set? Did it feel like a new start, a new beginning when you start with a new director and new writers?
It just felt different, quite honestly. It's now the third film we've been working together for quite a long time, and when you invite anyone into that very tight-knit creative space, there's always a fear that it's not going to work or not going to gel because you're so used to the well-oiled machine that's come before. Justin also didn't have all that much time to prep this film, which is very scary with a film this large. But he just came in and did not miss a beat. You want someone in that situation to take command, really, and has to delegate authority and make decisions quite fast, and he did that, and he's one of the hardest workers I've ever met. He has a different energy than JJ. He's because it was different doesn't mean that it was not something we welcomed with open arms. And to also have Simon on set, we've now been playing these characters for a while, so I think we have a greater sense of ownership now than maybe we did in the other films. And Simon knows us, has worked with us, knows what our strengths and weaknesses are, and on any given day we could work with what we had and then play with it and cut it down and add some stuff, and it felt very
So it sounds, Zach, it was almost like a collegiate thing. If you've got a writer and you're acting, one of the writers, and you're acting alongside him, does it work for you to say, can I say something different?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Simon has such a open sense of availability to all of us, and I think he was a great conduit to JJ not being around. It was great to have an advocate from within in a position of creative influence in the creative team. And again, Justin was an incredible energy to add to the mix. He came in. He's got a real quiet confidence. He knows what he wants and he knows how to get it. But he also had a lot of respect for us and our relationships with each other and our relationships to these characters. But having Simon there felt a little bit like the patients took over the asylum a little bit. It was great to have somebody from within our ranks stepping up and being in a position of power creatively.
And obviously Justin in those, famous for his high octane action sequences. How much of them do you actually do? There's a fantastic bike sequence, Chris, for you. I mean, how much of the stunts are you doing yourself here?
I mean, I do as many as I can. We also had extraordinary stunt guys. That one of them was a Canadian motocross champion. So there's stuff that he can do that I just simply cannot. And so I do as much. We prepare. We shot the film for about 4 months, and within that time, I'm training with the guys, and so on the day I can do as much as I can. But there's certain specific things that I just couldn't do, and they were incredible stunt guys.
Zachary, for you?
As I mentioned earlier, Spock gets pretty seriously injured at the beginning of this film, and so that put a little bit of a damper on his capacity to fight like he did in the last movie. And Into Darkness was his heretofore his moment of real physical exertion. So I was playing more with physical limitation in this film than physical exertion, but it was an interesting challenge in its own right. To track the journey of an injury throughout the course of a film that you're shooting out of sequence is always an interesting challenge.
One of the contrasts in the movie is, alongside the extraordinary set pieces and the high octane sequences that I mentioned, is that some of the scenes had a kind of a retro feel, where you are. It was like back watching the TV in the 60s.
How
and
so?
70s.
I'm just curious. What do you mean?
I think the scenes, particularly the close-up scenes when you're going on a new planet and you're standing, then you got your phasers and there's teleport. I'm thinking, wow, this is suddenly it feels like it's 1969.
I think that's also the 50th anniversary. I think there was a deliberate in the production design, the costume design is another way I think that's true. There was a bit of a deliberate move toward honoring the origin of the series and origin of these characters in the franchise. And, it's a pretty remarkable milestone for any entity of entertainment to exist for half a century. That's not an insignificant amount of time, and especially as our attention spans seem to be diminishing daily, it's pretty great to be able to celebrate that. And I think we wanted to do it in the making of the film. We want to do it in the promotion of the film, and hopefully audiences will feel that, because it's a huge cornerstone of what we made.
And the heritage of that TV series needs to be said again to a new audience, because it championed diversity, which probably wasn't even a phrase in the 60s and 70s before it was fashionable.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, Gene Roddenberry's vision of it was a very optimistic vision of humanity, and I think it had a lot of faith in our potential. And while this remains a summer popcorn blockbuster film, I think it sets itself apart slightly in the fact that there are themes and ideas that are reflected back at our audiences that are a little more significant and potentially a little more relevant to social interactions that are happening around the world these days. And that's a really nice thing to also be a part of, frankly.
Am I right in saying that the Vulcan doctrine of infinite diversity and infinite combinations, that's extraordinary?
Yeah,
isn't it?
I mean, there's a lot that's extraordinary. Also, the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few. That's one that I keep coming back to in this world, in this day and age. One of Spock's more famous axioms. I think there are a lot of those that can be drawn out of the Star Trek franchise and its history.
And given the collegiate nature of this movie, it must have hit you all very hard, the death of Anton Yelchin just a couple of weeks ago.
It did indeed. It has been a bizarre past couple of weeks, and awful, and even stranger now to come out and try to sell a film when something like that has happened. This is a celebration of Anton, really, in many ways, because it's one of the last things he did, and I'm so grateful to have known him and to have really worked with him quite a bit in this last film. And he was a beautiful guy, fun and funny and smart as all hell, and fearless creatively. He's the kind of guy that you look at and you think, what the hell have I been doing all my life? I mean, he was only 27 and he'd already achieved so much. So we miss him dearly.
Yeah, I mean, I echo the idea of celebrating Anton's amazing life and his spirit, and it's really hard to fathom that he's not going to come bounding through the door, and I think a tragedy like this serves to remind us how precious life is, and I think, the only remotely positive thing that is anywhere in the fog of the tragedy of it is how close we are and how much closer it brought us together to celebrate him. He was just a unique and profoundly talented individual, and not only for us personally, but I think for the industry, it's just a terrible loss.
And looking to what's coming next, Chris, is it Wonder Woman? Do we see you in that next after this?
No, I have a film called Hell or High Water coming out in August with Jeff Bridges and Ben Foster, directed by David Mackenzie, who did Start Up, and written by Taylor Sheridan, who wrote Sicario. I always want to say Serpico. And then I have Wonder Woman coming out next year in July.
Zachary, is it the Oliver Stone biopic that you're doing next?
Yeah, Snowden comes out in September, which I made with Oliver Stone last year, with Joseph Gordon-Levitt and Melissa Leo and Tom Wilkinson. A great experience and great people, and a film I produced and starring called Aardvark with Jenny Slate and John Hamm that comes out sometime next year.
Chris Pine, Zachary Quinto, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Simon.